All right, welcome to episode 14 of the Chris HOJ-Cast. And I was waiting for the right time to do this episode. And we had some stormy weather today that should be continuing tonight. And I just have a million things to do, but I wasn't particularly feeling motivated to do any of it. Just sort of honestly, this card and the topic of this episode had just kind of been eating away at me, and I just couldn't stop. I couldn't put away the ideas that I had for this episode. So let's just get this episode out of the way so that I can turn the page and move on. And so this episode is long overdue for the House of Jordan's feed that I've been. Feed is quite appropriate. I've been force feeding listeners of that old podcast who still happen to tune in content about Tony Dorsett and Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy. And now, finally, we'll bring it back. We'll bring it back to Michael Jordan. As I once heard it said, all hobby roads lead to Michael Jordan. So let's just kick this thing off, and I'm going to have a lot of thoughts as I go through the timeline of this particular episode. But let's kick this thing off with a quote from a podcast I listened to, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago. It was an interview with Ellen Langer, who's a professor of psychology at Harvard. And she was interviewed in for the podcast called Philosophy for Our Times. And even though Langer obviously has very impressive accolades, she's also a bit controversial because some of her studies and work might not be entirely replicable. And she certainly straddles the line to some degree between scientific rigor and maybe you might even say mysticism or something like that. I hope that wouldn't offend her if she heard that. Mysticism might not be the right word, but she's certainly open-minded to alternative notions that bend our pretty conservative notions of psychology and the science of psychology, or maybe I should say the social science of psychology, which makes her an interesting listen, if nothing else. And she proposes some interesting ideas. But she certainly has a reputation and credentials in academia that pressure her to stay within the boundaries to some extent. So she's just a very interesting person to listen to. And something that she said in this interview, and it's funny, this interview got a little contentious at one point, where she just kind of asks the interviewer, she's like, "What are you getting at here?" Because a lot of interviewers kind of tend to want to push back on some of her findings. But the point she was making here, she says, I'll just read what she said. She says, just looking at the color of a leaf can create a great deal of mindfulness. And so, yeah, there are many ways of being mindful, but it all mostly stems from knowing that you don't know and knowing that nobody knows. So you don't have to feel bad about not knowing. And everything is new and becomes exciting again. And so she is the proponent of this idea of mindfulness, with mindfulness in particular meaning not taking observations about the world for granted and not taking things that belong to the body of knowledge, of general knowledge, for granted. One of the examples that she gives in her podcast appearances is this idea that the student, the child who in math class gets called on to answer the very basic question of what is the answer to 1 + 1, and the child might say 1, and then the teacher says, no, you're completely wrong. That's ludicrous. It's obviously 2. Anybody knows that. And Langer says, well, yeah, obviously it is 2. The mathematically, the number 1 added to the number 1 produces 2. She says, but suppose that child was thinking about this idea a little bit differently. Suppose the child was thinking about this idea from the perspective of, let's say the child had a piece of chewing gum, and they spit it out of their mouth, and then they have one piece of chewing gum, and then they put another piece of chewing gum in, and then they spit that one out. Now they have two pieces of chewing gum. And then suppose they think, well, how about this is one and one, how about I add them together? And the child pushes the two pieces of chewing gum together, and rather than it remaining as two separate units, it becomes one. Two pieces of chewing gum stuck together become one bigger piece of chewing gum. And so the idea there that Langer is getting at is that 1 + 1 can equal 1 from a certain point of view. And she believes that there are health benefits to mindfulness, to this idea that that sometimes 1 + 1 is 1 in a certain light, in a certain point of view. And she believes that preserving that sort of ability to see things from different points of view, preserving the ability to appreciate and have a sense of awe about all of the things surrounding us, bringing it back to this idea that just noticing the color of a leaf, or just noticing all the different things about your surroundings. She sort of also mentions that this engages you in the present moment. But anyway, she's an interesting listen. If nothing else, this podcast was maybe 30 minutes long, this episode of Philosophy for Our Times. And so here's how I'm going to tie in this idea, and here's why I used this idea and spent this time introducing this idea for this episode, is particularly this line from her quote, which is, everything is new and becomes exciting again. Sort of this is maybe the marketing slogan behind mindfulness, or the idea that taking, not to reduce it to a cliche, but sort of stopping to smell the roses, that's sort of related to this idea here. But she's calling for something a bit more. But just stopping to notice and appreciate things has all these ripple effects. And one of them in particular is everything becoming new and exciting again. And I think there's something there that a collector might find interesting to bring to bear on their personal collecting philosophy. There's something interesting there about taking Langer's notion of mindfulness and applying it to sports card collecting, and sort of taking every card as if it's something brand new and studying every facet of it and every feature of it, and noticing it and admiring it. That's one of the ways that she would advocate that people practice mindfulness. And when everything does become new and exciting again, there's almost a reset. There's almost a reset going on there, or there's almost just a fresh set of eyes constantly being applied. And it doesn't just apply to the immediate thing either. It has the spillover effect of influencing the entire paradigm through which we look at systems of information or categories of information or disciplines. The idea here is that suddenly our old way of thinking can be augmented by, replaced by, or just complemented by a new way of thinking or a different way of thinking. And so that's sort of where this idea that 1 + 1 is 1 in some contexts, if you really sort of stretch the notion and allow the idea of 1 + 1 to step outside of the realm of logic and math and step into the realm of practice and practicality, that 1 + 1 can equal 1 in some contexts, right? And so that is that's sort of captured an experience that I had with collecting my favorite player of all time, which is Michael Jordan. And so now let me transition this discussion to the topic of this podcast, which is the card that brought me back to Michael Jordan collecting. And we'll get to that card in due time. But first, I think a long story is in order, in part because people who have followed or have any familiarity with the content that I've made and sort of some of the collecting philosophies that I've espoused over the last I guess, 9 years, might or very well will notice that the card that I'm going to reveal is certainly one that not only is it outside of my traditional collecting wheelhouse, it's also one that I probably have had relatively harsh things to say about, and even quite recently. I can remember doing something with bread of stacking slabs. I think not that long ago, maybe within the last year, where I was, and so spoiler alert, where I was sort of saying some negative things about late '90s Michael Jordan cards. I think I said it on air. Maybe it was in a private conversation, but either way, I've said it in other contexts too. I sort of said the idea that late '90s Michael Jordan cards, from Upper Deck in particular, is a confusing um, genre of Michael Jordan cards because there are these Michael Jordan only sets included, sort of akin to like Mercury or sort of akin to this new rookie royalty WNBA release, where it's just Mercury featured only Wembanyama, and the new rookie royalty WNBA features only Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Sort of the idea that these aren't full-blown products, So Michael Jordan had some of those. One that comes to mind is the Athlete of the Century set, which is a 90 card base set of only Michael Jordan, 90 different base cards. And so there's this sort of notion that Upper Deck had this special relationship with Jordan. I'm not sure at what point, but at some point he became an Upper Deck exclusive athlete. And just that it was easy as a collector, and it was convenient to rope off his Upper Deck issues, and instead just focus on Fleer and Skybox and Topps produced cards, especially from the '90s. In part because these products were much simpler, and probably to some level because of licensing arrangements, or just because of the taste of the product designers, or maybe both. You didn't get these Michael Jordan only products or anything like that. Jordan would appear once or twice, in the base set, and maybe a few times in a checklist, or maybe another time in a checklist. It is the face of a checklist, but and then he would appear just once in an insert set or something like that. And it was easy, and it was very straightforward to follow. And whereas Upper Deck certainly complicated things by producing a number of products that either were very heavy on Michael Jordan cards, or were Michael Jordan only, and they were commemorative and not necessarily documenting a season in some cases. And that sort of isn't quite in line with the traditional notion of a sports card. Sports card, tends to be documenting one season and being associated with that season, that's just a bit of a different concept than a commemorative card that sort of commemorates their entire season. That it's just sort of a different type of card, or different thematically, it's unique. And so for those reasons, and for others as well, just aesthetic taste, that Upper Deck cards were more subtle, more understated. Fleer, Skybox in particular, were more loud, shiny, colorful. That Upper Deck, at least from my collecting point of view, it just sort of I never let it come onto the radar, and I offered the aforementioned reasons for why. And Michael Jordan has a rich enough menu of cards to collect from the '90s that I could occupy myself fully just focusing on the non-Upper Deck '90s Michael Jordan cards. So I acknowledge that, right? I definitely want to acknowledge that and start from that point of view, that I am, perhaps my own bit of mindfulness, or whatever. Well, we'll see. We'll see as this story unfolds how I actually came around to this particular mail day, and why it's actually opened up a new chapter of Michael Jordan collecting for me. But let's start at the beginning here. So I have gathered here, and I'm showing on the screen, a post from my Instagram page from July 31st of 2016. And the card shown is the 1997-98 Skybox Premium Competitive Advantage insert in the grade of BGS 9. And I remember snagging this card on eBay at that time for in the $125 ballpark. And then I eventually would end up selling it, foolishly, for about double that 6 months to a year later. Although sort of experiencing the ability that cards had to increase in value, especially if one were lucky enough to acquire one cheap, and then were patient enough to wait for a confident buyer to come along. That taught me something different about the sports card market and its capacities. But still, I surely much rather would have kept the card in hindsight. I remember almost instantly after selling it, regretting it, and just especially when I saw that the process basically worked out such that I sold that Michael Jordan card, and then I just went to eBay and bought more Michael Jordan cards. So, I think I remember replacing it with like a lot of smaller cards, and I just sort of feeling like, yeah, I should have kept just the competitive advantage. But this was a sort of a testament to how I came back to collecting. I want to show this next screen here. This is from March of 2017. I've got 6 inserts pictured. And so, I really started becoming active collecting cards again around June of 2016. So this is within the first year of my collecting. I quite quickly was becoming aggressive in just picking up Michael Jordan cards. And so here I've got BGS9 of his Hooper Stars insert from NBA Hoops, BGS9 of his second Maximum Metal insert with the big chrome ball in the background. Got his Thrill Seekers, the first, or I'm sorry, his first Natural Born Thrillers in a BGS9 as well. All these slabs are BGS9 actually. I've got his second Planet Metal, the 98-99 from Metal Universe insert, the orange one. I've got his 97-98 Thrill Seekers here, second Thrill Seekers. And then the sixth card I have showing here is Electrifying, the Fleer insert. And so that's quite a few MJ inserts to accumulate within the first, I guess, 9-10 months or so of returning to collecting Jordan, especially because this year, this 2016 spilling into 2017 year, I was on a hiatus and I was studying for the LSAT, the law school entrance, or whatever, the law school test that you take to help figure out which schools are going to reject you. And so I was supposed to be studying for that, but I just got so sidetracked by collecting cards. So that's sort of where I was at. And I've got one from April of 2017. This is probably the most impressive card that I had at that time, was the 97-98 Hoops High Voltage 500 Michael Jordan BGS 85. This one was serial number 500 of 500 too. And I'm also showing his Stadium Club Warp Speed BGS 9. This was really the set that was most nostalgic for me, which was 93-94 Ultra. And I show here, among other cards from that product, the Power and the Key insert and the Scoring Kings insert too, which I was very fond of. And then I think I have one more. Yeah, so, and then this is the wall, right? So this is also from April of 2017. This is the wall of Michael Jordan cards that I accumulated. As I was looking at these old posts and gathering some up to share for this video, one of them said I'm approaching 200 Michael Jordan slabs, and I won't go over all the cards that are in this wall here. I suppose this wall probably is showing around 100 Michael Jordan cards or so, maybe more. And it's just lots of inserts. I see Soul of the Game. I see my 96 Ultra Platinum Medallion. Really enjoyed that card a lot. 93 Finest Refractor. Just all types of cool stuff in there. Okay, so that's kind of where I started, right? And I sort of, you can see here that I just had an aversion to Upper Deck, probably even more than most Michael Jordan collectors do. But I certainly had an aversion. I don't think I see a few maybe like Upper Deck early '90s base set cards, but I certainly was just those were just not anything that I really paid attention to on and sort of deliberately, even back then, before the philosophy of shrinking the sea was concrete. It was I think I was still practicing it on some level. I say I had some collector's choice, which is manufactured by Upper Deck, SP 1995-96 SP base card, the SPX, an SPX hologram card, some Upper Deck hologram cards. Anyway, but here's what's interesting. All the while, as I was ignoring Upper Deck, I was ignoring some pretty important Michael Jordan cards that I still don't have a taste for to this day. Let me be clear. But one example of a card that I was ignoring was this 1997-98, the Upper Deck game jersey, Michael Jordan jersey autograph card, which features a piece of his all-star game jersey. This card is autographed. It is numbered to 23, and I believe it's the first ever jersey autograph card. And so in 2018, in November of 2018, I'm showing a sale on the screen of this card from then, sold through the marketplace that was then known as PWCC. And this was right around the time that we started up the House of Jordans podcast, actually. We would start it, I guess, a month after this, roughly. And so this card sold for $94,630, which was the highest public selling Michael Jordan card, period, in the year 2018. And so, it's just interesting that I had my head in the sand for these intentionally, even as I was covering Michael Jordan cards and continuing to develop as a Michael Jordan collector, that these were just sort of out of sight and out of mind. And that is a pattern in practice with Michael Jordan collecting, really with all types of collecting. It's just that sort of because so much of this information about cards has to be held in our heads, and that we just have to remember it and just sort of know it, that we need to use a lot of shortcuts. We need to use a lot of heuristics, and we only have so much room. There's what's the name of the principle that says you can comfortably know like 150 people, or that's the most relationships you can manage at one time. We've talked about this on the crossover a few times. It's this sort of the same concept here. Like maybe you can keep track in your head of, I don't know, let's just say 150 cards at a time that you can really know well and stuff. I mean, the number is probably larger than that, but that's sort of the idea. It applies to all eras. And so, we just sort of say, I'm not going to include in my mind information about certain types of cards just because my capacity is filled up with these other cards that got there first, or that I'm being more deliberate about focusing on instead. But anyway, yeah, this is the highest selling card, and like I said, to be clear, I'm still not crazy about this card. I do find I don't I don't want to do the thing where I just trash one of the greatest Michael Jordan cards ever made, and one of the most historically important cards ever made, and one of the most valuable Michael Jordan cards ever made. But let me just say that the aesthetic of it isn't really up my alley, although they are nicer in hand. I haven't held a Michael Jordan, but I have held the card of other players, and sort of the surface design, it sort of has a texture to it, and the background has these like little holes that sort of represent the holes that are in a jersey that sort of lets the fabric and the clothing breathe when you wear it. And but I just, it has that millennial gray to it, right? Like it's very neutral, which is a characteristic of Upper Deck cards. They're understated. And I guess as I just look at it more, as I sort of practice mindfulness, as I look at it as something new and fresh, I do love the way that they put the NBA logo on the card's surface, and the blue accents are quite nice. The blue autograph, the blue ink is quite nice. But anyway, let me not dwell on that. So at that time, when I was sort of focusing on these inserts and stuff, like, well, I guess about a year later now, a little bit more than a year later, we're getting close to six-figure cards for late 90s Michael Jordan cards. And so like the card that I would have been much more enamored with would be something like this December 2018 sale of this 97 Metal Universe Championship PMG Michael Jordan out of 50 BGS 9, sold for $16,000 at that time. that this is a card that I would have been much more impressed with. And at that time, certainly 16,000. I believe that sale felt light at the time, but still 16,000 at that time for any Michael Jordan card was it was a considerable sum. And what also was happening around that time, I guess maybe about 10 months, 11 months later, so fast forwarding here to September of 2019, we have this other upper deck sale, and it's fascinating too that as I remember this sale, and if I went to look for it using search terms, it was difficult to find. The sale that I have pulled up here is from the 1998-99 upper deck base set. It's one of the themed Michael Jordan cards from that base set called Highway 99. And this is the gold 1/1 parallel to it. It's card number 290 from the base set. And it was listed by PWCC as simply a card from 1999. And one can see how it got listed that way because the copyright date on the back of the card is 1999. But this card is unmistakably from the 1998-99 Upper Deck base set, and a very cool base set, which features the rookie watch cards of Dirk Nowitzki and Vince Carter. And it actually, that base set has one of only 5 Dirk Nowitzki rookie year 1/1s. He has only 5. And that rookie watch from the base set of Nowitzki, that the gold 1/1 to that is one of the only 5. And I don't know how many Vince Carter has, but I'd guess he probably has very, very few as well. And so this is a card from that same base set, sold for $7,400 in September of 2019. So a little bit less than half of that PMG champ. And maybe that PMG champ was even worth more by now. I'm not sure, but it's not like this. I mean, $7,400 at that time was quite a bit. And ever since then, the PMG championship has certainly outperformed by maybe even an order of magnitude this particular card, because the PMG champ I see has a card letter value of about 340,000 and a BGS 9. And this Highway 99 gold 1/1 has a card letter value of 44,000. Now, granted, lowest confidence level on both, but this Highway 99 gold just disappeared after this sale. So this is the only sale of that card, and there's only one of them to sell. And so its price is directly tied to Michael Jordan's index performance in September of 2019. Whereas the PMG Champ BGS 9, I believe, has registered another sale or two since then, and those sales must have been quite high in order for the CL value to go based off the most recent sale times the change in Jordan's index to produce a card letter value of about 340,000. So that was sort of what was going on at that time when I was focused on these cool sort of mid-range inserts and mint-ish grades that certainly were coming in below the game jersey autograph, the PMG champ, and even the Highway 99 gold. And around that time, I sort of expanded. I went, my collecting preference expanded. I stayed relatively the same size at that moment. I definitely expanded during the pandemic, but that's another topic. So, but I was expanding then as a collector from focusing only on Michael Jordan, which I had done from 2016 to late 2018, early 2019, to expanding my palette to ultra modern. And I received a great bit of advice when I started there. It is actually a terrific bit of advice that steered me quite well, which was focus on ultra modern. If I'm trying to take the PC player approach, which I was, Josh, Cardboard Chronicles Josh, Card Ladder Josh, he gave me the insight to target the National Treasures RPA out of 99 and the player's rookie year gold prism out of 10. And that's just what I did. I did that for Luka, which ended up working out very, very well. And I did that for Christian McCaffrey. So, like, just to kind of illustrate the type of card, I pulled up a card that I previously owned of McCaffrey, his 2017 National Treasures patch autograph PSA 10, and nice 3-color patch. And so that's sort of an example of like where I started when I started expanding to player PCs of active players, of ultra modern players. But over time, as Josh and I, and I think maybe other collectors too, sort of, because I don't think we were the only guys with sort of this 90s background, or in his case, 90s and exquisite, 2000s, Topps Chrome, finest era LeBron stuff. Is I think there were several of us sort of who were all to varying degrees opening our minds to ultra modern. And I think we all sort of on some level we're wrestling with the sophistication of these products and the intricacies of these checklists. And to foreshadow what's coming next, it's not so different from the product architecture that Upper Deck was employing in the late 90s. And as we, as ultra modern collectors, newly minted, sort of came to wrestle with these checklists, and it was almost sort of by necessity too, just because during the late teens and the early 2020s, the market as a whole, sort of topics that went mainstream that were confronting the market as a whole, were the base Prism PSA 10 movement bubble, if you will, the proliferation of parallels, and these things sort of forced us, I think, on some level, to go to the checklist and to see, okay, so I've been focusing on the base NT RPA out of 99, which traces its lineage on some level to the exquisite RPA out of 99, and you can sort of see the continuity there. And I've been focusing on the gold prism, which to some degree traces its lineage to the Topps Chrome gold refractor out of 50, with the gold prism though being out of 10. But is this the right model? Or maybe if things got a little more complicated since the 2000s, and are becoming more complicated continuously year by year, and we need to know really what we're dealing with here. And so there's this constant awareness of sort of a running joke, or a running criticism that there's X amount, there's 45 parallels in Prism base set this year or whatever. And the criticism to some extent was overstated, especially when it was coming from 90s collectors, because, for example, I've done a comparison of how many different parallels Patrick Mahomes had to his 2017 Prism base set card, comparing that to 1996-97 Topps Chrome, and how many parallels Kobe had. And you might say, well, Kobe just had one. He just had the refractor, and Mahomes had a few dozen. And that is right. But on the other hand, if you actually add up all the different number of parallels Mahomes had, sort of the grand total, if you took the black finite and the gold and the camo, which is number 25, and you just sort of stack, okay, well, there's 25 camos and 10 golds, and you sort of, how many total here exist, how many total unique copies exist of all of his different parallels to the base set, and you stack it next to Kobe's, which had an estimation of about 1,000 total refractors. It was pretty equivalent. There's about 1,000 of each. That's just a brief aside, but the parallels continued to pile up as the products went on. I mean, 2017 was still a down year production wise, and as they continued to pile up, we had to wrestle with that. And I think that had the side effect of compelling us to get a greater awareness of how these products are built, and force us to learn to deal with how intricate these products are, when we make our selections, our collecting selections for what we actually want to add to our collection. And is a gold prism out of 10, is that sufficiently rare? Is a National Treasures RPA to 99, is that sufficiently rare given the variety of parallels and also the variety of different products? So in addition to this menu of parallels and also inserts that exist in larger number than one might think in Panini products, then there's the constellation of products themselves, the full sort of menu of rookie year fully licensed offerings for a player. And I just think that this sort of mandated that we go back to the checklists and that we understand all of them, and that and it really like sort of put this new emphasis on research that just wasn't quite present in 90s collecting. You didn't need to do the research in 90s collecting. It was pretty straightforward. You'd have the base set card, and it might have one or two parallels, and one of them might be numbered. And then you would have maybe an appearance in an insert set or two of your PC player from that product. And there's maybe 20, 25 products total. And it was much easier to wrap one's mind around that offering. And sort of 90s collecting takes on this other dimension, I think, as a byproduct of the structure of the product offering, which is an instead of needing to have insight into how many copies of things exist and all the different types of parallels and stuff. Instead, the insight drifts towards pack odds. So what was the likelihood, or how difficult was it to pull this particular card? Print runs, and maybe chief among these options, it also is population reports. And so population reports become a very, very big thing, and they still are, obviously, to this day. A low pop PSA 10 Michael Jordan insert is gold. It's, or cardboard gold, if you will. And I think part of that is because of the emphasis based on population report is one of the main metrics that's being used to evaluate cards by 90s collectors. And ultramodern collectors, it just do it a bit differently. Population report still matters, but pack odds certainly don't, in part because they aren't even published by Panini. And instead, you print runs, but in some cases stated print runs, for case hits and stuff like that, or not stated but inferred, and but most obviously numbered print runs that appear as a serial number on the card. So where I'm going with that line of thought is that these revelations that occurred to us as newly minted ultramodern collectors, I think, continuously led all of us to get to the same point sooner or later, which is that in this era, in the ultramodern era, one of ones are the crown jewels. And that is a bit antithetical to the way the 90s collectors approach things. 90s collectors, almost as a categorical exclusion, ignore one of ones. They just, part of it is a relic of actually living through collecting in the 90s. And at that time, there wasn't eBay, there wasn't online marketplaces, there wasn't social media. These cards might as well not have existed because there was no chance that we were ever going to see them. There's no breaking. There's no chance of you going to your local card shop and seeing one of them. There's very, very little chance of going to your regional card show and seeing them. Or even at the National, there's very little chance of seeing a one of one, especially because one of ones didn't even really start coming until 97, 98 range. And also just because they were so out of sight. How are you going to see one? None of the means by which we see them today existed then. So one of ones are just excluded. I'm reminded of an interview that Cajun Cardboard did with a Michael Jordan collector who put together one of the all-time great Michael Jordan collections, but eventually sold most of it. And he just said, yeah, I mean, we never thought about one of ones. They just, who knows anybody who has one? Nobody sees them. Nobody thinks about them. They're impossible cards. We just don't even think about them. And even that same reasoning to some extent applied to, cards out of 10 or something. Like, I mean, how likely are you to know somebody who has a PMG green? Yeah. Or even a PMG red out of 90? Although there are stories from that era of guys, pulling a PMG red in a local card shop and whatnot. So, so that mentality had to be completely flipped on its head, as we all kind of eventually came to realize that one of ones, at least for some of us, are the crown jewels of the ultra modern era, and that they aren't quite as rare as the name implies. So like I've done a comprehensive checklist of Nikola Jokic's one of ones from his rookie year, and he's a very unusual case because he was a second round pick who was drafted during a Taco Bell commercial. So there wasn't much pressure to make a bunch of Nikola Jokic cards. He certainly wasn't going to be featured on the box art. And and even still, he had 38 total one of ones, inserts, base set, etc. from 2015-16. And then, Patrick Mahomes, I've done this exercise for Mahomes as well. I want to say, let me not just, I should look up the number, but I also did it for Purdy, which was the subject of the previous episode. And I believe the number I came to for Purdy was he has 146 rookie year one of ones of solo Brock Purdy only cards. He has 146, and again he was the last pick in the draft, and he only appeared in about half of the fully licensed products from his rookie season of 2022. So yeah, I would suspect that the typical rookie from that year maybe had close to twice that. It's maybe 250, maybe 300 rookie year. That's just 1 year of one of ones. So we're dealing with one of ones that are dependent upon how you want to think about them. They're one of ones, of course, but they also belong to maybe a broader group of 200, let's say, rookie year one of ones, 250 rookie year one of ones, or in the case like Jokic or Purdy, 38 or 150 roughly one of ones. So the fact that they're not sort of the only card of this type of a player from this year, but in fact the player has a number of different cards meeting the criteria of it being a one of one. And granted, they're still one of ones. I don't want to take that away. They're still the only copy that exists of this particular version of this card. But one of ones are more accessible, partially because of the means. All of those means that I said didn't exist in the 90s, they do exist today. On any given moment, you can follow the social media accounts of, let's just say, some of the bigger auction houses, and at any given day, you could see an amazing promotion of an incredible one of one card that you would have never seen in the 90s. No matter, the technology, the means didn't exist. The instruments of communication had not yet been developed to present them, and now they're out there, and there are more of them too. So sort of one of ones becoming the crown jewels, and sort of one of ones being more accessible. That maybe not the very best one of one, like maybe not the Prism Black one of one, or the NT Shield autograph one of one, or the the Immaculate Logo Man autograph one of one. Maybe these are still impossible, out of sight, out of mind cards. But still, seeing a one of one is more commonplace, and it just feels more accessible. And also, as a matter of practicality, they are easier to get to because of all the different methods of networking and communication that we have established now. So one of ones take a much different place in the collecting hierarchy in ultramodern. They're accessible. They are considered cards to target. They are not considered things to put out of your mind and to ignore. And so that marks sort of my transition as a collector. So as I change the visual being displayed on the screen from a McCaffrey NT out of 99 PSA 10 to a McCaffrey NT Shield autograph one of one. Same card, same core card, but the one of one as opposed to the out of 99. That sort of symbolizes, I think, the direction that a lot of us collectors who are developing within the ultramodern field, I think many of us took that step. Now, one of the reasons why I think a lot of us went to ultramodern, or I can speak for like myself and for Josh to some extent too, is that we sort of noticed that our 90s PC players just became obscenely expensive. and into a degree that either was cost prohibitive or maybe not entirely cost prohibitive, but also just hard to justify given knowledge of other offerings from other eras as well. And so, like, to give an example here of what I mean by the radical shift in price. So we were just talking about this exact card, the 1997-98 game jersey autograph Michael Jordan, in this particular copy, number 18 of 23. And I highlighted a sale of this card for $94,000 in late 2018. Well, now I have a sale on the screen of January 2023, which is a little more than 4 years. So a little more than 4 years had elapsed between those sales. And during that 4-year period, that was when many of us were making an expansion into ultra modern. Well, this exact same card sold for $840,000. So a multiplying of nearly 10 times its value. Rough math there. Closer to 9 times, I guess, but I'm just speaking, trying to be able to speak quickly here and throw numbers quickly at you. So 94,000 to 840,000 in a little over 4 years. I think that speaks to the idea of how many of us were just overcome by the financial burden that it would take to continue to collect, at the highest level of a player, which for Michael Jordan, I never was at that level to begin with. But by this point, I certainly have to come to grips with the fact that I'm not at this tier that I could, for a card that has 23 copies, granted 23 means something different in the 90s. 23 is something much less in the 90s. But 23 copies, and this card is approaching $1 million. So during that time, I sort of stood pat. I did try to add a few Michael Jordan cards, but sort of my mind had already been warped a bit by the one-of-one pursuits for all the other ultra-modern players I was collecting, whether it was McCaffrey or Le'Veon Bell or Nikola Jokic or more recently Patrick Mahomes. That was the ever-present challenge, was dealing with the fact that these one of one, all of a sudden, once you have the taste for the one of one, the out of 23 just, or the out of 100 or the out of 500 or the unnumbered with a population of 500 or whatever, it just didn't quite provide the same excitement, or at least that's how I rationalize it. But it's also possible that I had served my time in the 90s era, so to speak, and that just as an era, even if they were one of ones, I perhaps part of the siren call of ultramodern was being able to watch all these players and go down the rabbit hole of learning more about the sport and these different sports and their histories and how these ultramodern players can potentially carve a place for themselves in history. That might have been a factor too, or maybe even more of a factor. I don't know, but certainly for whatever the reason, the excitement just wasn't quite there, and it not to the same way it used to be, and the prices, just that combination made it pretty easy to stay away for the most part. But even as I did that, I kept together the final fruits of my Michael Jordan collection, which largely came together in early 2019. So, like, I have on the screen here basically the core 8 Michael Jordan cards that have stuck with me over the last half decade or so. I have the PMG Red, the 98 Star Rubies, the Molten Metal Fusion Titanium, which is the gold colored one out of 40, the finest gold embossed refractors, which is out of 74, the Fleer Vintage Classic 61, numbered to 61. And then this one actually was a pandemic edition, but the 96 Flair Showcase Legacy Collection Row 2, that's numbered to 150. And then these were early pandemic pickups as well, the stadium clubs, So I think that row 2 might have been late 2022 or early 2023 that got added to the collection, whereas the Stadium Club one of a kinds, I think those were late 2020 or around there that I added those. But the other 5 were the fruits of massive consolidation projects, taking that wall of MJs that I was showing earlier, and even more that I accumulated after, and combining them into just this handful of cards with very memorable acquisition stories for each of them. And so I kept that PC in place, even though at the market price for any of those cards, I certainly would not be rushing to buy them today or a few years ago. I would say 40 copies, 90 copies, 74 copies, 50 copies, 61 copies, or in the case of the one of a kinds in the row 2, 150 copies. I would feel that at the price, that's just too many copies. Of course, that analysis is exclusive to me, but from the market's point of view, the demand for these cards, especially for Michael Jordan, especially for the 90s, especially for all the things we've said about the more limited menu of cards offered in the 90s and sort of the logic of how 90s collectors approach things. I'm not saying that the market is wrong. What I'm saying is that for my collecting taste, I just wasn't really aligned with where the market had gone on these cards. But I kept them. And I talked about this on an Iowa Dave episode not that long ago when he was kind enough to have me as a guest. But the idea was that even though my collecting preferences have evolved and changed, but I didn't burn down the Michael Jordan town and try to use all of its resources to build up and to completely shift into building up a different town. And that could be very tempting. But instead, I kept it in place. For the most part, I kept most of that collection in place, and it hasn't really changed very much. The composition of my Michael Jordan collection has only changed at the fringes over the last 5 years or so, and I kept that way in part as I think about the reasoning why. Like, what's the justification here, knowing that my tastes have sort of changed and I just genuinely feel differently towards different types of cards right now. And one factor is that if I did take away these cards, which I think Michael Jordan in particular serves as the foundation of my collection, if I did take them away, everything else might crumble too. In other words, like some of the more riskier players I collect, players whose legacies are uncertain, players who might be way overpriced right now from the point of view of 5 years from now, if I took away this foundation, those risks don't make sense anymore. That suddenly the whole collection it's a lot more riskier when you take the average of all of its parts. But with this foundation in place, it sort of gives permission to take bigger swings. It's sort of like having a big lead in a baseball game, then I can chase the home run, but and have more fun, sort of, or let loose a little bit. But if I don't have a lead, if I'm trailing in the game, I need to be much more tactical. But I suppose even that's a bad metaphor, because today analytics is, my understanding in baseball is that it's been revealed that the value of the home run chase is actually maybe the most valuable pursuit. But way out of my depth talking about baseball there, probably shouldn't have even rolled out that metaphor, but I think the point stands anyway. The point that I'm trying to communicate is that this Michael Jordan foundation is essential to the rest of my collection making sense. And the other part is that I know with a high level of confidence that when I did put together this collection and assemble these pieces, that it was from a genuine place of passion as a collector, adhering to the logic of 90s collecting and following the pursuits that at that time a more novice returning collector would follow. And so there's something to be said for the fact that this particular composition of a collection crystallizes a mindset that will continuously refresh and renew as new people come in, or as people never cycle out of Michael Jordan and 90s collecting, but instead stay in. And that something about this collection captures my sentiment at that time as a genuine collector and byproduct of that structure of thought. And so even though I don't necessarily practice that structure of thought anymore, and it can be difficult to return to it, but I can still notice it. I can still see how it operated in composing this collection. And even though these aren't necessarily the cards that I reach for first when I'm cycling through the PC box, they're not the ones I reach for last either. And occasionally they are my favorite cards to rifle through and to look at, in part just simply because the design elements that were used are still unmatched. Today we have things that are different and in some ways more impressive, but these 90s era cards are also in their own ways the most beautiful cards ever made, in my opinion. So that's sort of the thought there on why I've preserved this collection and why I still enjoy it so much, even though I don't necessarily add to it or still practice its logic anymore. So now I want to talk a little bit about this screen, which is Cajun Cardboard's Michael Jordan hierarchy, which I think will crystallize a lot of the observations I made about 90s collecting. And this is a terrific project that he did. And it was a very ambitious project, and he was the perfect balance of modest and ambitious and resourceful and careful to make effectively a checklist of Michael Jordan's 90s cards, and to sort of use a combination of input from experienced collectors as well as pack odds and population data to sort of break up Michael Jordan's 90s cards into 4 different tiers. And I was one of the people who had just a very modest amount of input on this list, but it was a privilege to be a part of that. But what he did, and in consultation with Frankie 3500 and Josh Dawson, Northeast Sports Cards, and the collectors who also helped him build this, he almost sort of documented and formalized what many 90s MJ collectors roughly kept in our heads, which is a ranking of sorts. And I like that he did it in tiers rather than just one, two. He and even tiers are going to be controversial, and he acknowledges that. Everybody acknowledges that. But he sort of made explicit all of the or at least for his instance, or his sense of how collecting into the market worked, he made explicit how the reasoning works. And so some examples are, for example, he excluded one of ones. He excluded autograph cards. And so like those sort of those decisions make explicit a practice a lot of us sort of engage with in our heads, or sort of just roughly discuss with each other, is that we just like the shiny 90s cardboard. That's what we're here for. And we want a picture of Michael Jordan on it, and we want it to be rare, and we want it to look great, and we want it to have significance too. And so he has this project here. And so he has on the poster, there's a poster version available of this, and on the back side he gives the pack odds for all the various cards that are in these 4 different tiers. The reason why I'm calling attention to this now is because when I was interviewed by him on one of the episodes, I don't know if it was directly about the topic of the hierarchy, or maybe it was like a spin-off episode sort of tangentially discussing it, but I raised the topic, what about the one of ones? Why do we exclude them? And at that time I was still sort of wrestling with it, not dedicating enough effort to understanding it, but sort of instead just pushing back against it, because of course it makes complete sense why one of ones are overlooked, as we've discussed already. But I was sort of fighting it, and also sort of fighting it performatively, theatrically, just sort of to create some content to challenge the audience to think about it Why are we ignoring the one of ones? Why are we doing that? And so, I came loaded to his show with a spreadsheet that was still rather remedial or in its infancy, but I had roughly tried to compile how many quote unquote 90s one of ones MJ had, and I wasn't making any distinctions at that time between multiplayer cards and single player cards. So the number that I ended up quoting, I think at that time, was like maybe around 100 or something like that, maybe a little bit more. I want to say maybe 110, and I think I may have under at the urging of Frankie, I think I may have included plates too, because he has some printed plates from Stadium Club, 1997, 98, 1998, 99 Stadium Club. He has I think 8 plates from 97, 98, maybe 4 from 98, 99, and then he has some multiplayer cards too. Actually, quite a few, where like it's like the holding court, like it's him on one side, different player on the other. Or there was a card or two that was he and Pippen together, dual player card. But combining all of them, I came up with a number. I think it was about 110, and I think I mentioned that number on the show. But really, I don't think anything I was saying was really resonating with 90s MJ collectors at that time. I just don't think, because I think this might have been around 2022, 2023, something like that. And I didn't really get much feedback on it. I didn't really get much pushback on it. Just nobody really gave it much of a thought. I do think it's more than just a practical. It's deeply entrenched in Michael Jordan collectors, not just as a decision that they actively make, but also as just a byproduct of years and years of collecting in this fashion. That they just one of one, that word just goes in one ear and out the other. But nonetheless, I raised the topic, and the seed was not only, I think, well, most importantly, I think the seed was planted in my own brain. And so anyway, I mentioned that checklist, and I've refined it since quite carefully. And the result that I get now, once I've sort of made the methodological choices of excluding printing plates and excluding multiplayer cards, once I do that, 1997-98 ends up producing 7 cards, but you could almost make an argument for 6, depending upon how you feel about the Power Deck audio card. And I'm on the fence about it as well, because it certainly is a sports card in the sense that it belongs to a set, and it belongs to a broader product. But and it exists on the checklist in that set. It is a card in a set, but it has this other purpose, which was it's a CD-ROM. It's literally a CD-ROM. You can put it into a CD player and get content, audio content. I think maybe visual. I don't remember exactly how it works. I've never actually seen one, but I do know that it functions that way. So it has this other purpose too. It's also like this promotional item. It's and not just a promotional item, but it's like a piece of entertainment about Michael Jordan. So it's a card, but it's also something else too. It's serving multiple purposes, and typically sports cards serve one purpose, which is being a part of a set. But let's just include it. Let's tie goes to the runner, and the runner in this case is including the card. So we'll call it 7 solo MJ cards in the 97-98 issue. And by the way, there were no Michael Jordan one of ones prior. So that's the first year of MJ one of ones. And then the second year would be 1998-99, and there are 65 in that particular grouping. 65 total solo Michael Jordan cards, excluding printing plates. And like I said before, I have carved out down here printing plates. Yes, I guess there's 12 printing plates total from those 2 years. And then you can see I've also started, and I've composed all of the 1999-2000 one of one MJs as well. And so that's the third year, and my number there is 234. I'm not as confident in that number. I'm not as familiar with all those sets as I am with the first 2 years. And I also think 1999-2000, that is a season that is undeniably two things. Number one, it's lost any connection to being a quote unquote playing years card, because it's not documenting his final season, which 1998-99 cards do have a claim to do that, even though Jordan did not play in the 1998-99 season. And they've sort of lost any argument to sort of be considered playing years cards. They do have the argument to be playing days cards, in the sense that Michael Jordan's total career, he starts in the NBA in the 80-45 season, he ends in the NBA in the 02-03 season. This falls within those two bookends. So they do have that sort of argument going for them. But it's in furtherance of sort of the notion that 97 that the 98-99 kind of are tethered to his active rostered playing years, the 99-2000 are not, is that 97-98 features a mix of Upper Deck and non-Upper Deck products. You have Metal Universe, Ultra, and then SPX Finite, which is Upper Deck, and then Upper Deck Flagship, and then an Upper Deck product called Upper Deck Hardcourt. And then when you get to 99-2000, it's all Upper Deck. There's, because of the nature of licensing, all the other manufacturers lost the ability to make Michael Jordan cards. So, and then there's also the notion of 90s cards. So sort of the category of 90s cards are, what are the, you can even see that I titled the spreadsheet here, Michael Jordan 90s 1-of-1s. And the idea being, what is a 90s card? And I went back and forth with ChatGPT about this a few different times, and sort of asking, well, for what is the decade of the 90s for the NBA? And ChatGPT said that decade would extend from the 1989-90 season until the 1998-99 season. And the reason being, each of those 10 seasons, the majority of them took place in one of the years belonging to the 1990s. So the 1989-90 season, the majority of that NBA season, like the majority of all NBA seasons, takes place in the second year of the hyphenated year. So 89-90, 1990 would have the majority of the seasons. So like in the NBA, like half of October, November, and December would have been played in 89. And then 1990 would have January, February, March, April, May, and into June. So more of the season took place in 1990. So ChatGPT said, we're going to include 89-90, and we're going to cut it off at 1998-99, and we're not going to include 1990-2000 because the majority of that season was played in the 2000s. So since the 90s logically should be a decade, the 90s is describing the concept of a decade. And since the 10 seasons belong to that decade, it seems like it's this pretty good argument that it's 89-90 through 98-99, that really you have 2 years worth of Michael Jordan 1-of-1s that belong to the 90s, which would be the 97-98, and then that would be the 98-99. And so in totality then, final number, there's 72 1-of-1s. There's 7 from 97-98, and then there's 65 from 98-99. And so that's the conclusion that I've come to after a lot of digging into this. But I'm going to continue. I'm still going to continue digging into later products. I ultimately want to come up with a checklist that I update all the time that lists every 1-of-1 Michael Jordan card, period, whether it's from playing days, whether it's Bulls uniform, whether it's Wizards uniform, whatever the product. I'll eventually do that, but it's a big time commitment. But I'm working my way there. All right. So let me say something else about this sort of foray into Michael Jordan 90s 1-of-1s that I sort of was raising the issue of with Cajun a few years ago, and sort of, I think, unwittingly, just for the point of content mostly, but also exploring ideas that were occurring to me as I oscillated back and forth between the mindset of an ultra modern collector and the mindset of a 90s collector. Well, here's another set of thoughts on this topic, this time coming from the collector MK Sports Cards. And this set of thoughts accompanied a post that he made that that shows a card that he picked up. I guess look, this pickup is, or this post is dated December of 2024, and this card comes from one of those. This card is one of those 72, one of those 72 90s MJ one of ones. This is one of them, and it's the 98-99 Upper Deck Gold card number 230W. And what he said about this is the following. I'm just going to read his Instagram caption. Since one of ones are all the rage these days, it's a good time to recap the landscape of Michael Jordan one of ones. This is one of only 41 total base set parallel one of ones that Michael Jordan had issued in 1997 and 1998 combined. And note that Michael Jordan had none prior to 1997. And so why is that significant? Well, 1997 and 1998 cards are considered by many to be the final playing day issues for MJ in the 1990s while still an active member of the Chicago Bulls. He officially retired on January 13th, 1999. That is an extremely small number, especially when you consider that many 90s cards have either been lost or are still sitting in sealed boxes and packs, so it's probably a good amount less than 41 that are actually out there in collections today. I'll never own any of the 6 1997 base set parallel one of ones, so this one from 1998 is my consolation prize. And it's the perfect one at that, since I'm a lover of gold parallels, especially from long-standing flagship products like this. And these are the only base set gold parallel one of ones that MJ had issued through 1998. In my opinion, all 41 are still incredibly undervalued versus what other much less rare 90s MJ inserts and parallels are selling for today. And it is because 90s collectors and investors have been slow to recognize the importance and scarcity of one of one issues such as this. To put it in perspective, LeBron, Steph Curry, and Tom Brady, for example, each have literally thousands of plain day issued base set parallel one of ones. There is certainly a gap in education here, and so it is one that I'm trying to help fill. Anyway, this was my favorite Michael Jordan pickup of 2024. Please DM me if you have or ever come across any other 90s MJ one of ones for sale or for trade. And then happy holiday season, everyone. Okay. So he is in a from a slightly different point of view, expressing a note, and in particular, we can sort of analyze this a bit and see how he connects it to LeBron and Curry and Brady, and sort of that connection is I think gesturing at the difference in logic of the ultra modern collecting versus the 90s collecting. You can sort of see that playing out in his very well articulated rationale of why he thinks that there's an underappreciation of Michael Jordan's quote unquote plain day one of ones, and or a different way, his 90s one of ones is another way, a way that I might look at it or phrase it. Okay, so having shared that, let's fast forward to 2025 and let's finally get to the point of this episode. The point of this episode, after much exposition, is it all kind of builds up to this mail day. So this mail day here is, I'm showing to the camera and for the audio listeners, this is the 1998-99 Upper Deck card number 230A, Michael Jordan gold one of one parallel. And so this card is related to the one that MK shared, which was the 230W. And so the 230W is the final of the 230s, and the 230A is the first. I'll explain what that means in a second. But first, let me give the acquisition story, if you will, for this card. So this card shows up on the Instagram page of a collector who is mostly Cal Ripken Jr. and Shohei Ohtani. This collector is based out of Japan. And several people, after this card was posted, and note that this card is raw, and it's still it's still in a one touch, which is a side note. I love the way cards look in one touches. I also love the way they look in the old screw downs that are similar size to the one touches. And so several people sent me this post, and at first I said, nah, like ignore, like great card. I went and I liked it, the post, and I was like, really cool card. But I was just like, whatever, like that's one of those Upper Deck, one of ones. Like I have the blinders on. I'm not looking at Upper Deck one of ones. But I thought about it. Like, it was a turning point. It was an inflection point. It was so many different factors coming together at the same time, because one of the things that matters, I think, is a card has to be available. It's not satisfying. It's not sufficiently satisfying to have a collecting experience that's comprised of lusting after the best cards and having no chance of getting them. What's the point in that? Just sitting there daydreaming all day and not actually getting in the game and collecting things. And that does sort of approximate how I feel about the most elusive 90s one of ones. Like, for example, so MK mentioned in his post that 1997-98 has 6 base set one of one parallels of Jordan, and they are his Ultra base set parallel, and then there's the 98 Greats themed card from Ultra. So there's 2 from Ultra, 2 from Ultra's base set, and then there's 4 from Flair Showcase, row 0, row 1, row 2, and row 3. And the 98 Greats I don't think has ever been seen. The 97 has been seen. It was with Grant Waldorf Stories for a while, but I think he eventually placed it in a collection, and it hasn't surfaced since. And then there are the 4 Flairs, and 3 of them are with Nat, and I've playfully made serious offers to Nat to get, I would say, let me just buy the worst one or trade you for the worst one, which is the row 2, I guess, depending upon which, let's just not get into ranking them right now. But I said, give me the worst one, row 2, like whatever, name your price, or I'll trade you my PMG red for it. And he very politely declines, but politely but firmly, because I don't think there's a chance in hell that he's going to give up one of those, and that I think he would move mountains if the row 3 ever appeared. So the row 3 hasn't been seen yet, just like the 98 Greats. But so you think about that, and when the 97 masterpiece one of one from Ultra, from the first appearing base set one, showed up, the price, the ask on that was obviously in the 7 figures, and so that's just out of the question. And so like, as much as I appreciate those cards, and if I ever were to make a list ranking Michael Jordan's best cards, I would certainly include the one of ones. Not saying that there's anything wrong with excluding them, because we've gone through all the reasons why that makes sense. But if I were to do my own hierarchy project, I would have an entire separate tier for the one of ones. I think, I don't know. We'd have to see how that plays out. And I don't want to just say that in passing without acknowledging that there are strong arguments to be made that, for example, Michael Jordan's PMG green is better than any of his one of ones. I think the majority of people might even agree with that. So let me acknowledge that point of view. But those being out of reach, so to speak, really just sort of, I can't help but my mind is turned off to the possibility, right? I mean, these cards are 25 plus years old now. Are they just going to show up? No. Well, one did. One did, and it was not listed for sale or anything like that. But I think there were enough people in the hobby community who knew that A, I'm a big one of one person. I've sort of built my ultra modern collecting brand around it. And two, I'm a big Michael Jordan collector. And so people just said, well, here's a one of one of Michael Jordan. Who do I know that would like to see this? And they thought of me. And so a few people sent me, and it even took me a day or two. And then I said, let me make an offer. Let me DM this person and make an offer. And so I did. I DM'd him. I said, would you mind if I made an offer on this card? This is an absolutely beautiful card. And they said, please do. And so I said, 20,000. I would like to offer you $20,000 for this card. I can pay immediately. And what do you say? And they came back quickly without much hesitation and said yes. And so from there, it became a logistical nightmare because PayPal wouldn't allow me to send that much money to them. So I got on the phone with PayPal and they said, well, just break it up into two $10,000 payments and that'll work. And that didn't work either. And then they said, well, try smaller amounts. And then I got concerned, like, well, what happens if PayPal lets me send half and then they freeze me from sending the other half? And now this person's just kind of holding half my money. And I don't know this person. They have good reputation, and they provided vouchers, and I reached out, and those people vouched for them as having successfully orchestrated trades and purchases from Japan to the U.S. And eventually, I had to say, look, I've tried PayPal for several days, and you got to understand, like, I'm really like, man, I like, all of a sudden it sort of dawned on me that I have a chance to get one of Michael Jordan's 72 90s one of ones. And then I just sort of start gazing at the card and I'm like, man, this card is awesome. I'm like, the elegance and the simplicity of the design and the fact that almost all of MJ's one of ones sort of are themed in some way. They have these big concepts and images and like from this Upper Deck set that he has like a heart and soul card, which is very busy design wise, very beautiful, but this card, it actually reminds me quite a bit, not of 90s one of ones, but it reminds me of the ultra modern one of ones, where the only difference between it and the base set card, or I'm sorry, the only difference between it and its base version is just that the border color changes, and it gets a nice little stamp on its backside. And so I started sort of realizing this is the card for me. And so I eventually I said, look, I said, please, if you have time, contact PayPal Japan and just see what they can do. And I said, throw the card, and even before we got to that point, I remember suggesting even like throw the card on eBay, and put the price of put the price of 21,000 because you're going to get fees, and I'll just hit buy now at 21,000, and then we can do it. But eBay was prohibiting them because they had an eBay account with a ton of feedback, but all of it was as a buyer. And eBay was prohibiting them from listing a card for that much money. So it was just like, man, how are we even going to do this deal? But they contacted PayPal Japan, and PayPal Japan guided them to send me 3 different invoices at $67.77 each, or whatever the amount times 3 is to get up to 20,000. And then as soon as those invoices came in, I was like, great. Paid them. It actually worked. And they shipped the card, and the card was here within a week. It was excellent. It was a very, but as far as the seller and my portions of this went, it was very smooth. It was very difficult to make the transfer of money, but everything else in terms of negotiating and shipping and successfully arriving was very smooth. I asked the seller about the provenance of this card, and here's what he said. I'll just read it back. I saved his message into my notes on this card. He said, I acquired this card around 2003 through Yahoo Japan auctions. At the time, I heard from the seller that it was pulled from a pack at a card shop called Red and Blue in Tokyo. I thought I would keep it for the rest of my life, but I was moved by your passion and decided to let it go. And so the card it's never seen the inside of a slab, right? This card has just who knows how. I mean, this may be the one touch that it was in when he purchased it 22 years ago. But that's the provenance, that's the card, and that's the acquisition story. And what sort of shifted, the thing that I was referring to before, and a thread that I want to tug on just a little bit more, is the idea that suddenly a Michael Jordan 1/1 felt available. A card belonging to that group of 72 90s Michael Jordan 1/1s, it felt available. And once it felt available, everything else clicked into place, and I realized I need to do whatever I can to get this card. And so you might be wondering, where did the offer amount of $20,000 come from? And so let me explain a little bit more about what this card is. So in the 1998-99 Upper Deck base set, Michael Jordan, whether on checklists or in themed cards or in unthemed cards like this one, he appears, let's see here, 1, 2. So he has his first appearing card in that set is the game dated card number 23, which game dated is typically seen and for some players is their only base set appearing card in Upper Deck. And so I've talked to some people about this who feel strongly that the game dated card is the true base set card, and it's also the first appearing card. And so card 23 is the game dated card. That's one. Then he has one called Heart and Soul. He actually has two called Heart and Soul. One is him and Pippen, and one is just him on both sides. So there's the second one, is the Heart and Soul themed card. Then he has another one themed To the Net, which is card number 169. Then he has two checklists, and we'll include those. He is the subject picture on the front of two checklists, and so we'll include those too. Those are in the base set, and they have gold 1/1s. Then he has 23 cards that are numbered 230A, B, C, D, etc., all the way to W. And so MK has the 230W, and then the one that I picked up here is 230A. And so then there's 21 others that live in between those. And the unique part about these that I find compelling is that they don't take any theme. They have Michael Jordan stats on the back of his full career, which is one of the nice things about 98, 99 cards, is that they are the most immediate cards to document his full Chicago Bulls era. So obviously his 97, 98 cards don't have 97, 98 stats on them. So it has this full table of career statistics. Then it has a caption about the fact that he captured his 10th scoring title in 1997-98, averaged 28.7 points per game. And then the front side is a very simple action shot, his name, gold foil, and then his position guard and Chicago Bulls and this little logo. And it matches what all the other base set cards, all the other unthemed cards of the other players in the set look like. So like Rick Smits recently had a gold 1/1 from this set sell, and it looks exactly like this. But as I mentioned before, other players in this set, their only card is the game dated themed card. And Jordan has a game dated themed card, which appears as the very first card, card number 23. So these cards, these 230A through W, these 23, they are his first appearing cards in Series 2. And then after those 23, then you get a card 290, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Let me see if I can. Here it is. So this is card 290, the Highway 99 Gold. which sold for $7,400 back in 2019. And then he has 2 more checklists for Series 2. So in total, how many cars does that bring us to? 1, 2, 3, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. So Jordan has 31 base set one of ones from 1998-99 Upper Deck. And that was the first, this particular base set is the first time that Upper Deck ever offered a one of one parallel to its base set in basketball. Therefore, of the 72 90s Michael Jordan one of ones, 31 come from this base set. So this is, in terms of Michael Jordan one of ones, this is the product. This is a prolific product that produced almost half of those 72. I just have a whole different reverence for that product as it all sort of suddenly snapped into place. And so I was talking about price. How did I land on 20,000? And the way that I land on 20,000 is because one of the other cards from the 230s, one of the other ones sold on eBay most recently for a little under 15,000. Like that was like the end of last year, maybe early in 2025. And these don't show up often, obviously. And I can't begin to express how much regret I have that I wasn't awake enough to pursue that card at that time, that I was still dormant, that I was still ignorant. But I used that comp to sort of think to myself, well, this is the first of them. This is also his first unthemed card. This is the one that most resembles a base card to my eye. Doesn't have any extra content sort of to position the card. It's just literally a card about Jordan's career, and particularly about his 1997-98 season. And so I said, well, there's probably a premium associated with it being the first. And then there's also the fact that the market has increased. So how about let's try 20,000? And I probably would have, I can't be for sure, but I might have even gone a little bit higher. But it also was a strong offer. I mean, I'm reminded of 2018. It was the fall of 2018 when I brought a bag of $20,000 in cash to meet a guy at a car dealership in Southern California to purchase what became my PMG Red. And $20,000 in 2018 is very different than $20,000 in 2025. But it's interesting, it's the same amount. And I remember at that time also paying the most that had ever been paid, at least for a PMG Red in that condition. I believe a PMG Red 9.5 once sold for like 40,000 or something before. But basically, there was for the people who found out how much I paid, they thought it was way too much. Probably was, but I find myself in a similar position now, where at that time I had just such a conviction for the PMG Red, and I have quite a bit of conviction for the category of Michael Jordan one of ones now. Understanding that my conviction for the PMG Red was born of the logic of a 90s collector, and my conviction for this card is born of the logic of an ultra modern collector. So it might really not translate, but it translates for me. It's almost the perfect Michael Jordan card for me, given my collecting evolution and so on and so forth. So let's close that chapter, discussing that as a pickup, and let me move on to something else. So I want to highlight a collecting achievement from my buddy Stan Stasic, STACIK 1313 on Instagram. So he's a guy like several others who's been collecting Michael Jordan one of ones for a long time. He doesn't narrow his focus only to 90s, in particular only to 97, 98, 98, 99. He's got a broader focus, and as a result, he's able to collect a wider array of really cool and beautiful cards, as we're going to see here. But I want to tip my hat to a particular collecting achievement that he had, and one that he can also continue working on. So first, let me just play this video from his Instagram page. And it's a video from December of 2023. I wish I had been paying closer attention to him at that time, and maybe I could have followed his lead and taken some inspiration. But I'm late, as usual. Well, or as I sometimes am. I'm stubborn or whatever. But here we're showing some of his Michael Jordan one-of-ones. And we just actually went through the row of his Michael Jordan one-of-ones, also from 1998-99 Upper Deck, but not from the base set. And that's a set that I want to talk about. In particular, I want to talk about his achievements within that set. And so now we're showing some of the 2000 MJ one-of-ones, 1999 Upper Deck Black Diamond. Those are 1999-2000. And then at the very top, I'll talk about this one first, and I'll talk about the other ones that I want to talk about in a second. At the very top here, as I paused it, he has the 1997 first year Michael Jordan one-of-ones, the Power Deck Audio white one-of-one, which I talked about a little bit earlier, is sort of being this card that lives in this gray area because it has dual purpose. It's a trading card, but it's also a CD that can be inserted into a CD player. But that is one of the 7 one-of-ones of Michael Jordan from 1997-98. And it's the only insert. So the other 6 belong to base sets. This one is the only insert. So, like, in a vacuum, and it's the first Upper Deck Michael Jordan one-of-one ever. So the 1998-99 was the first base set, but this is the first MJ one-of-one ever from Upper Deck. It's like in a vacuum, this is the only MJ one-of-one from 97-98 insert. It's the first MJ one-of-one insert, and it's the first Upper Deck Michael Jordan one-of-one. So, like, that's one of the most impressive resumes a card can have. But as is the case with every, it's just astonishing how this, like, Michael Jordan doesn't have the perfect card. He doesn't have that 84, 85 game used National Treasures logo man autograph one-of-one. He doesn't have that perfect card. Every card he has is flawed in some way, which is really a unique dimension of his collecting. And not to say that even that NT couldn't have flaws, but just like the way we today sort of have these clear Mount Rushmore cards for every player, and Jordan just, it's much messier than that, you know, because like here you have this card that has so many things going for it, but on the flip side, it's a CD-ROM. So that's so typical. That typifies Michael Jordan collecting. And it's just amazing here that Stan posted this, and it's got 145 likes and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 comments. You know, people have no idea what they're looking at here. But okay, but aside from that Power Deck, Stan also showed a row that had 7 of these cards which belong to the MJ23 insert set. So 1998-99 Upper Deck, if you include the base set and its insert sets that have one-of-ones, and there's only one, which is the MJ23 insert set. If you include those, 61 of the 72 Michael Jordan 90s one-of-ones come from that single 1998-99 Upper Deck box. Well, one of the Series 1 or the Series 2 box. And to be honest, I'm not sure which series this insert set comes from. But this insert set has 30 cards, and they are all Michael Jordan and only Michael Jordan. There are 30 of them. It's called MJ23. And each of them has one-of-one. And that's something worth remembering, too, that ultra-modern collectors will appreciate, is that all of these 72 Michael Jordan one-of-ones are one-of-one-of-ones. The only one-of-one. And so of those 30, this is the second year of Upper Deck insert one-of-ones, if we count the Power Deck from the year prior. Stan has 9 of these 30. And I was kicking around the idea the other day with him and a few other Jordan collectors that if he were ever to complete all 30, and he's at 9, and I personally know, and I've alluded to him that I know where about half a dozen more are. If he were ever to complete all 30, I would struggle to think of a more impressive singular feat by a Michael Jordan collector. To me, that would be more impressive than accumulating a PMG green. Granted that a PMG green costs more than all 30 put together, because those 30 go for about 15 grand a piece too right now. So PMG green is considerably more valuable than all 30 put together, and so are some of these other one of ones too. But to get all 30, and he also already has that power deck, so to have every upper deck flagship insert one of Michael Jordan from the 90s, to be able to say that, to me, that would probably be, I mean, maybe somebody can come up with something better. Maybe, somebody can say, well, what if somebody got all 4, like Nat is very close to getting all 4 of the 97, 98 Flair masterpiece one of ones. What about that? Like, isn't that better? Maybe that is better. I don't know. I certainly could see an argument for that. I as soon as I start talking about what's better and what's worse, or what's more impressive and least, and it really needs to consider all the different things that somebody could do. But so suffice it to say, it would be one of the most impressive things I can think of as a collector, knowing the amount of resources that you still need to marshal. It won't be cheap, obviously, combined with the persistence and the resourcefulness and the networking and the negotiating. And to me, that would be extremely impressive. So I really want him to do it. And there's no rush to do it, right? I mean, take your time. Enjoy the ride. But go for it. That's what I say. So I think he has a chance to do something really special there. But I also think he's already done something quite special. To have 9 of those 30, when you include the power deck, to have 10 of the 72 90s MJ one of ones, very cool. And then since we're already coming up on, well, I have 2 segments left that I want to do, and I'll just do this one more quickly. Something I wanted to do was go to Card Letter sales history, sort by most recent, and then run through all the different Michael Jordan sales of $15,000 or more, which is roughly what these upper deck, like for example, like the Stan inserts, the MJ23s, or the base set gold one of ones from 98, 99 upper deck. That's roughly what those sell for now on the open market. Maybe it's closer to 20. I don't know. The most recent comp is 15, so I went with 15. And let's see what else $15,000 or more buys you in terms of Michael Jordan cards. So on July 8th, this 2003-04 Ultimate Collection, Michael Jordan autograph card number 10 of 23, that sold for $20,000. And it should be noted that the autograph is faded a bit. Still a remarkable card, graded PSA 9. On July 7th, this 1998-99 Duncan Go Nuts insert, PSA 10 Michael Jordan, sold for $18,000. That card, in a grade of PSA 10, has a population of 65, and its universal population across all the grading companies, well, I shouldn't say all, its population across PSA, BGS, SGC, and CGC is 595. So we'll call that 600. Michael Jordan's 1986 Fleer BGS 9, that went for $17,000 on July 7th. That card in a BGS 9 has a population of 1,900. Universal population of 47,000. Michael Jordan's 1993 Scoring Kings in a PSA 10, pop 97. Universal population 5,300. That sold for $18,600. July 6th, PSA 10. A BGS 10 of the 1997-98 Topps Rockstars Refractor Michael Jordan sold for $17,400. That's a population 4. Total population 792. The 96, a cut above from Skybox EX 2000, graded PSA 9, sold for $17,777. That was on July 5th. That has a population of 30 in the grade and 416 total. And so there's just a couple of recent sales that are in that range. I accidentally clicked out. I wanted to look at a few more, but whatever, we're running late. And anybody with Card Ladder can go do that search for themselves and sort of see how far $15,000 or so goes in Michael Jordan cards in general. Just set the filter to $15,000 and up and sort by most recent and put Michael Jordan in the search box. Here's a final thing that I wanted to do. And I'm sure Stan is not going to appreciate this, but it's just, it illustrates the point, and maybe it'll pressure him if he does see this. Maybe it'll pressure him to take action. Or it won't. I don't know. What am I, the matchmaker for cards? But anyway, this is my final thought. On eBay right now, in a poorly titled listing, with all due respect to the seller. In law school, I used to have a professor who would say, never say with all due respect. Because all that means is that what's coming next is going to be not respectful, probably. And judges don't like that stuff. But I haven't been able to completely cleanse it from my vocabulary. This listing on eBay reads 1999 Upper Deck Michael Jordan 1 of 1 Quantum Gold M8 Beckett 9 Mint. And so I have so many issues with this listing title because, first of all, it doesn't say gold. And this is gold. It's the gold 1 of 1. Second of all, and this is the slab says this, the card is called number M8, but if you actually look on the back of the card, its full number is QM M8, with the Q and the M standing for quantum. The insert set is called MJ23, and it's put on a weird line on the Beckett label, but that isn't included in the title, MJ23, and that's the name of the insert set. You can see it right there in the front, MJ23. And then the year is called 1999, and this card belongs to 1998-99, as you can see on the Beckett label. So it's a tough listing to find. Like, I've got Michael Jordan eBay searches set up for 1998 Upper Deck, 1998 Upper Deck Gold, 1998 Upper Deck 1 of 1, and none of them will find this card. In order to find this card, you need to put in 1999 or remove the year. So it's difficult to find it, but it is there. It's sitting on eBay right now, 23K OBO. And if you squint or zoom in, you can see that, sorry, Chris, the seller has turned down your offer of $11,023.45. And they didn't turn it down. It was auto declined. It didn't even meet how much they wanted offerers to put in, even for them to consider the offer. And besides, this is not the pool I need to be playing in anyway. I'm obsessed with the 230s. But what a cool card. Belongs with Stan, but he feels like it's a little too high. So it rots away on eBay. But to the topic of availability and how the availability of 230A triggered an entire shift in my thinking. Well, here is one that's available right now. And I do think it belongs to Stan. All right, that's going to do it for Chris HOJ-Cast 14. Eventually, one of these is going to go over 2 hours. Thanks for listening. See you guys next time.